I'm your first alert meteorologist, Callie Zanandri, taking a look at this week's drought monitor. A mixed bag across the state. The central and eastern plains picked up beneficial rainfall the first week of June and saw a big improvement. The rainfall has nearly eliminated drought conditions across southeastern Colorado. But unfortunately, the western slope stayed mainly dry, with portions of Delta, Montrose, and Mesa counties remaining under extreme drought. Now, from grasshoppers chewing through gardens to mosquitoes buzzing after those afternoon storms, Colorado's insect activity is closely tied to the weather. So what can we expect this season? Joining us now is Lisa Mason, here to break down this year's summer bug outlook. Now, Lisa, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, what's flying, what's biting, and what do weather conditions have to do with all of that? How does Colorado's weather, the heat, the drought, how does that all impact the overall bug activity as we look ahead to the summer months?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's highly variable too. Some insects thrive in drought, hot weather, like our grasshoppers, but miller moths, on the other hand, prefer cool temperatures, and so they're gonna keep migrating so they can stay in that cool weather. And then we have insects like bees. Bees love and thrive in hot weather, but if drought conditions, there's less flowers, there may not be as much forage for them too. So it can be hit or miss with that, but it really depends on the insect.
Now, like you just mentioned, we've heard grasshoppers thrive in hot, dry conditions. That's what we're seeing this week. Are we seeing an uptick in grasshopper activity due to the recent weather?
It is predicted that we are going to have a high grasshopper population year again, especially on the eastern plains. Along the Front Range, it could be a little more variable, but especially with those drought conditions. Now, with the recent moisture, that probably prompted plant growth, which gives them more food to feed on. So the more food, the more plants, the weedy species, hopefully they'll feed on those more, and there'll be less pressure on crops and ornamental plants, but we are still anticipating another high grasshopper year.
Yeah, I've seen them hopping around every time I go for a walk.
Yes.
Now, talking about miller moths, they seem to invade homes every spring, especially mine. How does the weather influence their migration pattern or numbers?
Well, there's three factors that determine what a miller moth season is going to be like. They overwinter on the eastern plains and then migrate to the mountains because they don't like the heat. And so the population and the nuisance will depend on the number of moths migrating each year, which can ebb and flow depending on caterpillar host plant food, the amount of food that's available for them. Now, with drought conditions, they're probably going to scoot along their migration quicker to the Colorado Front Range because there's more flowers available to forage on in irrigated landscapes. But they won't stick around too long because of the heat, where they'll migrate up to the mountains so they can stay in that cool weather. And then the third factor is that weather and moisture. So they might stick around a little bit longer if we have a prolonged cool period, but as soon as especially those evenings heat up, they're out of here to the mountains.
They want the cooler weather. Now, how does rainfall, standing water influence mosquito breeding across Colorado in the summer?
So standing water is the perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes, and that's a good tip. Leaving standing water is never a good thing during those summer months because of mosquito breeding. And with the recent weather, we are likely to see more mosquitoes. Our partners at Arapahoe County Public Health have actually seen double and in some cases triple the number of mosquitoes, all mosquitoes. So not just the ones that carry West Nile virus, but they are already seeing high numbers. So we're likely to see high numbers of mosquitoes this season. Too soon to know how that'll impact the chance of West Nile virus, but we are seeing mosquitoes. So it's important to protect yourself. Insect repellent with DEET, avoiding the early morning hours, evening hours, and wearing long sleeve clothing.
And that increase is due to the wet weather we saw at the end of May and the start of June, correct?
Likely, yes. One of the factors. Yep.
So are recent weather patterns, such as the warmer winters or dry summers, helping or hurting the pine beetle population?
Oh boy, the mountain pine beetle. Drought stress, a warming climate and fire suppression all influence not only the mountain pine beetle, but we have a variety of forest pests in Colorado, and each species of tree has its own set of pests. And so we are seeing a slight increase of mountain pine beetle. 2024, about 5,000 or more acres. And there are other pests that had even a more significant impact. Western spruce budworm, which is a defoliating moth, so it feeds on the new growth of the spruce trees, saw a high year. And then we have other bark beetles too that also were responsible for killing some trees last year. Douglas fir beetle, western balsam bark beetle, spruce beetle, and their populations are more likely to increase during long periods of drought, over a number of years, not even just recently, but over a number of years. Yeah, that definitely can ramp up their populations.
Now, Japanese beetles, everyone does not want to see those in their garden. They're becoming a bigger issue, especially here on the Front Range. How do temperatures and moisture affect their spread and their activity?
Well, so with Japanese beetles, that is an invasive insect. It is not supposed to be here, and it's kind of immune to a lot of our weather patterns. During the winter time, the grubs are deep in the soil, in the turf grass. They're protected, and then the adults thrive in hot weather. In fact, that just makes them want to feed more. So we're likely to see high numbers of Japanese beetles again, and they are spreading a little bit along the Front Range. So the one interesting thing that I think people can note, though, is the grubs live in turf grass, only turf grass, and they have to have moist turf grass to survive. And so a homeowner can, if they make sure their lawn dries a bit between waterings, those grubs can't survive in the lawn. I always encourage people to make sure they have grubs before taking action, but that can be an easy trick that homeowners can do to avoid having grubs. And then, with the adults, since we do have Japanese beetles, hand-picking them, avoiding the traps or putting them far away from valuable plants can help with Japanese beetles.
Now, are we seeing any unusual bug trends this year that might be tied to climate shifts or the extreme weather?
Nothing nothing too out of the ordinary that we haven't been seeing for a long time. I do want to mention the bees, though, because specifically beekeepers had extremely high hive losses last year. That's largely due to varroa mites, extreme weather, other pests and diseases, loss of forage, those kinds of factors. But that's extremely high. And then hobbyist beekeepers saw about a 50% loss nationwide. So with our native bees, populations ebb and flow year to year, but we certainly are seeing declines in some of those bee populations. Of note is the western bumblebee, which, over the years we've seen over a 70% decrease in their population.
Now, what can people do to support beneficial insects like bees while protecting themselves from pests like mosquitoes or beetles?
Oh, I love this question. Take precautions, of course, to protect from things like mosquitoes, but don't let that deter you from being in your backyard. The cool thing about insects is we have so much biodiversity, and most of that biodiversity is in our landscapes, and we barely even notice. So go outside. Observe all the cool things, the ladybugs feeding on aphids and the solitary hunting wasps, catching spiders. Those aren't harmful insects at all. And so those observation skills are key. The other thing you can do is provide habitat spaces for them. Specifically with our bees, solitary bees, we have over 1,000 species of just bees alone. And most of those are solitary bees that nest underground. So providing those habitat spaces, providing forage, lots of flowers, water, and giving our insects space is great. And if you're really interested in observing insects, there are 2 community science opportunities through CSU right now to participate in. The first one is a statewide biodiversity monitoring program through the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. So anyone that uses iNaturalist can submit those observations and participate in the statewide biodiversity survey. And then if you're really interested in bees, the Native Bee Watch Community Science Program is a great way to learn how to identify bees, and you can actually collect and submit data from your own backyard by watching your flowers. So it's a great opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. So much great information, and we will see you back here next week for your First Alert Drought Report.
Thank you very much.